Welcome to Voices from the Vineyard, where we share stories of faith, hope, and community from Valley Vineyard Church. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Hi, this is Pastor Jimmy here. Thank you for joining us on Voices from the Vineyard podcast, where we take time to connect with people who are part of our church community, and sometimes others who aren't. But it's a way that we're able to hear stories and learn from others. And so I'm excited that today we have with us Bill Elander, who he and his wife Lainie have been a part of our church now for about 2.5 years, and they've been in ministry for many years, now retired, but they're still busy and doing many things. But they've also lived on both coasts of the United States. And so just excited to have them to be a part of our church, and excited to have Bill here with us. So welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Jimmy. Good to be here.
Yeah. So I have a few questions for you. So for those who do not yet know you, tell us a little bit about where you grew up, what your childhood was like. It's always a great question to let others know about kind of our formation and kind of where everything started. So.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Milford, Connecticut, which is just outside of New Haven, so that area, and lived there. I lived in Connecticut. Actually, I was just talking with Lainie. I think I lived in Connecticut for 65 of my 75 years.
Oh, okay.
So I feel like I've been out here almost half the time, but that's not even close. Uh-huh. So I grew up in Connecticut, and my parents were divorced when I was 8. So that kind of changed my life, changed my family life, and it was hard. Talk about formation. My parents had no faith at all. I mean, I don't know what they believed inside, but they never talked about it, didn't go to church. But they always wanted me to have a religious education. I think that's kind of a 50s thing as opposed to anything. I've never heard people do this now, but they would send me to church all by myself. So they would drop me off at church on Sunday morning, pick me up when it was over.
Well, they just thought you needed a little bit more help.
I guess they thought I needed some of Jesus in me. No, I don't know why. I've never really asked them what their, I don't know. They just thought that a religious upbringing was a good thing for me. Okay. So I loved church. I really did. I liked it started with Sunday school. We didn't go to church. I was in a mainline congregational church. So if you think of New England and the white church on the end of the green, that was me. I was there every Sunday. And then as I got older, I went into the youth group, the junior high group, and the high school group. Went on retreats and did service projects. It was great. I don't remember anything about Jesus during that time. Okay. Although I know that they taught about it because I have material from then, and it talks about Jesus and faith and all that stuff, but it just went completely over my head.
Okay.
So, when I graduated from high school, I kind of aged out and I was going to church, and I felt that church was just almost like fake. Now, I'm not saying it was, but that's the way I perceived it. What I got out of it was like I believed in God. I mean, I really strongly believed in God. I would have like arguments with people who said they were atheists and argue about that God exists, which is, I'd love to hear a tape of that now. But I just got into, my father was an alcoholic and very, very much an addictive type person. And out of high school, I just went full bore into drugs and drinking and rock and roll. And it was I just lived that lifestyle for a number of years. Okay. And what happened is that my best friend became a Christian. And it just really, this is one of the guys I argued about being an atheist. And he says, I'm a Christian. And I'm thinking, oh, great, I am too. And he goes, no. He goes, that you don't understand what I mean. So I didn't get it, but he hung out with me, and there was a peace that he had that I didn't have. And even though he wasn't talking a lot about his faith, there was something about him that just was like a magnet to me. And what he had, I wanted. But what happened is that, God started speaking to me through that, which I didn't really understand that much at that time. And he said, I want you to give your life to me.
Wow.
I want you to surrender. And I thought, no. I like what my friend PJ had, but I'm not surrendering. You know, I'm not going to give up my life. And so there was a struggle for like 2 years where I just would live in my life, and God kept on saying, I want you to surrender to me. And it just, there's that parable where Jesus a story about, the person that searches for a pearl and finds it, and then the other one who's just kind of walking through a field and trips over it. That was the walking through the field and tripped over it person. Okay. I was not on a spiritual journey. I wasn't going to gurus. I just wanted to live. I wanted to drink, do drugs, and be in a rock and roll band. That was my goal. Well, it didn't work out. None of it worked out. And it came after like two and a half years of that struggle of God speaking to me and me resisting. Finally, New Year's Eve, just all by myself, all my friends were alienated from me. And I just said, God, I surrender. This life really stinks. And I gave my life to Jesus. And that's, that was the start of my journey.
Wow, that's amazing. So Jesus became real to you at that moment, even though you were in school for many years, or actually Sunday school.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because for a long time I didn't see any connection between all my years at that church and then my relationship with Jesus. But as I've gotten older, I understand that those years at the Congregational Church really were a foundation. That there are things that God did and sowed into me that really bore fruit as I started to believe.
Okay.
But he definitely was real to me. I went from 0 to 60 as far as commitment to Jesus, although I had no idea what to do with it.
Yeah. Okay, so you're a young adult at this point.
Yeah, I'm like 24.
Okay, and then so you have this encounter with Jesus. You say yes, you surrender. How did ministry life become a reality for you? I don't know if you and Lainie were together at that point, or okay.
No.
Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah. So my call to ministry came before I met Lainie.
Okay.
So I didn't meet Lainie for a few years down after a few years down the road.
Okay.
But after that, so that night, that New Year's Eve, God really connected me with one of my professors who turns out to be a Christian. I kind of thought he might be a Christian. And he hooked me up with Campus Crusade for Christ in San Bernardino.
Okay.
And I was looking for a job doing film or television, and he hooked me up with their media department. I ended up moving there. And, I just really was happy to be out of Connecticut. As I was driving across from Connecticut into New York, I said out loud, I'm never coming back here. Because, as a Christian, I just couldn't relate to the churches there. The people were they were churchy, wonderful people, but they just they were like a different culture. And I wasn't comfortable, and they didn't know what to do with me. And in California, I got involved with Calvary Chapel, which was right at the end of the Jesus People movement. So if you saw the Jesus Revolution, I walked into that at the end. Okay. And it's like a whole church of people that were just like me, long-haired, hippie-type people, rock and roll people, and I just didn't know that even existed. So I'm thinking, oh, this is great. I have a great church. I have a great job. I'm in California. Woohoo! And 2 months after I got there, I was working, and I was just working at a job that, a film job that didn't take any brains at all. So my mind was just drifting and daydreaming, and God gave me a picture of Milford, the beach. So I saw my friends, all my non-Christian friends, walking along the beach, and people I loved dearly, and I knew that they didn't have any idea who Jesus was, and I knew they were as unhappy as I had been as I gave my life to Jesus, and he came and filled that unhappiness. And I'm thinking, God, how that's not fair. How are they going to know you? And he said, I want you to go there and give them what I've given you, which is a church, the gospel in a way that they didn't have to cross a lot of barriers, that the only barrier was Jesus, but they didn't have to go to a different culture, talk a different way, listen to different music. And at that point, my life changed. Like that is still to this day, that's the flag in my soul, that before that, I was just kind of doing my own thing. After that, I just had one purpose that I never varied from, was to get to Connecticut and plant a church. Wow. And the next couple years, I was trained by Calvary. I went out and helped plant a church in Arizona for a couple years, came back to go to seminary, and that's when I met Lainie. Okay. And we ended up being sent out in 1986 to plant a Vineyard church in Connecticut.
Okay.
So that's how I went from just being a normal person to that call.
So it was in this time that you were with Calvary, and then you discovered the Vineyard movement. What initially drew you into the Vineyard movement?
Well, so it's an interesting thing what God did there. I was at Calvary Bible School, knowing that I was going to go plant a church. I mean, nobody else really acknowledged that, but I knew that's what I was doing, and they were okay with that. So I was getting trained, and every Wednesday, they had somebody come in and do some kind of a teaching. Not one of the teachers at the school, but they brought somebody in. One Wednesday, it was John Wimber. Okay. And he came and talked about church planting and talked about church growth, because he was, a Fuller consultant, with Fuller Institute of Church Growth. And he was talking about that, and I'm like, my ears just completely this guy. So afterward, I went up to him and I said, this is what I feel God's called me to do this. I just love to talk with you. And so we talked a little bit, and he goes, well, when you get to the point where you're going to do it, maybe we can, we can talk some more. And later that year, God ended up not sending me to Connecticut at that time, but sending me to Arizona, there were a number of left turns on my journey to Connecticut, and this was one of them. But what happened is that when I knew that we were going to go plant this church, this other friend of mine and I said, we need to talk to John Wimber. So I called him up, looked his name up in the phone book, and called him up and said, John, I don't know if you remember me. I talked to you up in Lake Arrowhead. We're going to plant this church. Would you talk with us? Mm-hmm. So we met with him and Bob Fulton, the two of them. And we said, this is what we're doing. Would you help us? And he said, well, I'll tell you what. I've written a lot of material about church growth and church planting for other denominations, but I have no idea how it's going to work with Calvary. Mm-hmm. So he said, if you go through this material as you plant your church and tell me what's relevant and what's not relevant, I'll coach you. Mm. So he coached us for 2 years. In Arizona, we would come back every once in a while and to give him our feedback, and he would talk about what was going on. And so I felt like I felt like God was saying to go to seminary. I came back to Southern California from northern Arizona and started going to John Wimber's church, which was Calvary Yorba Linda. Okay. So everything was Calvary at that point. But it was really what the Vineyard was. I mean, he was teaching morning and evening on what the Vineyard was. It was really interesting. For like 4 years, I was thinking about this. 4 years, he just talked morning and night about, the values that he wanted to sow into the Vineyard Church. And I sat there and listened to that. And it was just really life-changing. It really kind of embedded that into me. And then a year after I was there, I got there 81, not that far after Lonnie Frisbee came and blew up the place. Mm-hmm. And then a year later, he had the meeting with Chuck Smith, and where Chuck said, people go to a McDonald's, they expect a McDonald's, and John said, well, I'm not comfortable with that limited a menu, and they just said, look, let's just go our separate ways. Mm-hmm. And the Vineyard movement, like this church was already a Vineyard, mm-hmm. West Side was a Vineyard, but then that's when the Vineyard movement was started, and because all those churches were like looking to John for wisdom and training and oversight. Mm. So
I do want to ask a little bit about Vineyard values, but
Yeah.
before that, it's interesting to me how you said I'm never coming back
Yeah.
to Connecticut.
Yeah.
And you were here on the West Coast, but the Lord gave you a vision
Yeah.
to go back.
Yeah. Vision and call is powerful. And it's funny because we planted that church in '86, pastored it for 32 years. And then we shut it down. We felt that that's what God was saying, shut it down. And while I was there, I was on staff at Elm City Vineyard, a wonderful experience for like 4 years before we moved back here. And one of the things that I had to work through is am I still called? That call that day doing films, looking at film and getting that vision where God said, go back. Is that still my call? Is that still what God wants me to do? And God said, really dramatic. He goes, no, you're done. You did it.
Yeah, you just wanted to be obedient to that call and until you felt released.
Right. And I didn't know if I was released. And that was a real struggle. Like, should I still be, okay, the church is closed down, but should I still be doing stuff in Connecticut? Should I still be? And he said, no. I mean, there's a different call you have on your life now, and you need to be obedient to that.
Yeah. So going back to Vineyard values, looking back, which of these values continue to inspire you and shape your life in not just ministry, but also just in life in general?
Yeah. And, there's so many that are so good. The thing that I would say two, the number one for sure is intimate worship. Okay. Is that whole idea of connecting deeply with God. The whole thing of Vineyard music worship is, the revolution was singing intimate songs directly to Jesus, to God, not about him, not, and that has still to this day. I still do that in the morning. I just listen to, I'm not a musician. I play drums. It's kind of hard to drum devotionally, but it's just intimate worship, the desire to be connected. And the other thing is caring for the poor. That's always been, when we started our church, when we planted our church, we always had a component of reaching out to the poor. From beginning to end. It was just it grabbed our hearts so much. And John and the Vineyard in Yorba Linda and Anaheim did that in such a powerful, dramatic way that it just kind of, that DNA came into us, and to this day, we still, that's a call that I don't, feel released from.
The Vineyard churches have been known for worship and intimate worship, like you said. But I remember, or I didn't hear him say it, but I've heard of John saying that if you don't have compassion ministries in your church, then don't call yourself a Vineyard church.
Right, exactly. No, he was very, very strong about it. He was very, very strong about it. And he always did it, and he communicated it. And, I got it. It got imparted to me. So I'd say those are the two Vineyard values that, I love all the other ones, but those are the two that really have impacted me.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. You've been part of the Vineyard for a long time, so it's just good to kind of see what are those values that have influenced your life.
Yeah.
So you've been released from pastoring or to being on the East Coast. You transitioned here to the West Coast, and part of it was to be closer to your children as well, right? And probably avoid the winters on the East Coast. Just kidding. But as you look back, you're a spiritual director. Well, I'll ask you a little bit about that in a few minutes. But as you look back in your life, what are some of the important things you learned from as you pastor people? What are some things you learned about yourself? And that's a spiritual direction question.
Right. You know about that.
Yeah, I've been through that as well.
It's obviously I learned about things about planning a church and pastoring. I would do this differently. I kind of procedural things. But the thing that as I reflected on this recently, one of the biggest things that I learned, and it took me a long time to learn this, I learned about being present and learning how to deal with emotions. My family was emotions were, not just discouraged, they were forbidden. My mother would say, if I would have an emotion like pain or, upset, or she would say, don't, you can't do that. And so it's like emotions just were stuffed down. And, when you're pastoring a church, there's both the emotions of, the success, the struggle of planting and people and how people relate to you. And but then there's also just like walking with people in their pain. People who suffer, who lose a child, people who like people who their marriage blows up or whatever. I had no idea when those things started to happen. I didn't know what to do with them. And I didn't do anything with them. And I know I hurt people over the years that they felt like they weren't cared for in those times of grief and pain as much as they felt like they should have been. And I own that. But I started to understand it. I went, and I might reference this again in another part of our conversation. I went to a pastor Sabbath retreat. Lainie and I both went to a pastor Sabbath retreat in 2010, which was a Vineyard kind of group, a 10-day retreat where it was like a soul spa, where they had every kind of ministry, and they really took care of pastors, and one of them was spiritual direction. But in that, I started to get in touch with this whole emotional thing, and they started talking about family systems, and I did some counseling, family systems counseling, and I realized I had never even, what I just said about my mother not allowing emotions, I wouldn't have even known that up to that point. Yeah. I just thought that's the way it is. I thought that's the way it is, exactly. And I started to walk out of that, and emotionally healthy spirituality, that kind of came on the scene, and emotionally focused or faith walking as it was when I did it, were really, really helpful. And I started, and then when the pandemic hit, I was doing spiritual direction, and so many pastors had such a high level of anxiety, and as well as myself, and I had to learn how to both deal with anxiety myself and just do direction with people and help them to process the anxiety, process their fear, those were terrible times. No matter what side of anything you're on, that first month you just didn't know what was going to happen. Yeah. You had no idea how it was going to turn out. Is this the end of the world as we know it? Is this going to be forever? And so I started to learn how to do that. And in me learning how to do it, then I was able to help guide other people. And right now, Jimmy, it's the thing I probably do the most, is help pastors learn how to deal with their emotions, their stress, their anxiety, because nobody teaches us these things. Yeah. And pastoring is stressful. And so. Yeah.
Let's end it there before you need to counsel me right now. Just kidding. Well, I asked you a little bit about self-awareness. What is it that you've learned through the years about yourself? But what would you say also, what are the things you learned about God through your journey of shepherding others?
Yeah. I think the thing that I learned about God, so I grew up in a church system that was very Bible-based, but also very narrow. In other words, we believed things a certain way, and we were right, and it was all black and white. And anybody who didn't believe, and I'm not talking about like the Apostles' Creed or like a statement of faith, just in all the different
eschatology, end times.
That for sure. And but then all other things. If you didn't believe those, you were on the other side. Yeah. And you just didn't like those people and didn't hang out with those people, and I never completely bought into it, but I was still formed by it. I was formed by it a lot. And as I pastored, I was just confronted by God, not really by people, but by God, with the reality that there's so much mystery with God. It's not, there are the black and whites, there is, there's, the Apostles' Creed, and, so much of the Bible gives us clear instruction, but then there's also a lot that's even in the Bible where there's like conflicting verses. There's this and there's this and there's, well, is it that? But then there's that, and
you can make a great case for either one,
right?
Without denying what's actually there.
Well, see, for me, that was a new thing to say, that I can see it either way.
Mm-hmm.
I never could do that. It's like you had to believe one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to a student at Yale, a Yale Divinity School student, having lunch, and we got talking about predestination and free will. I mean, who knows how we got onto that, and a lunch over pizza. And we're talking, and I said, well, I think they're both true. And he's like, no. He goes, you can't believe that. I go, yeah, I think they're both true. He goes, that just completely dismantles the foundation of logic. And I said, well, so be it, And I'm thinking, what am I saying? It's like I've started to get this kind of appreciation for mystery. That there's the main and the plain, but then, and in the Vineyard's always said, we need to believe the main and the plain. And then the other things that aren't main and plain, then there's like grace, there's charity, so other denominations, I'm like, maybe they're, I'm not saying they're right and I'm wrong, but I can see that they're looking at it that way. I'm looking at it this way. There's different ways to look at it.
So what I hear you saying is that a lot of times we can put God in a box, and this is the way he made things, or this is the way he is.
Yeah.
And you're saying that we need to be open to a God that's bigger than the box we're trying to put him in.
Yeah.
And there's mystery, and even his love is greater than we could ever acknowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found that in pastoring people, it was so much more fruitful and life-giving in using that paradigm of mystery, as opposed to trying to cram people into your box. So that's something that it's been in my life, but it's also been something that I learned in pastoring. And I still, when I am with someone, or I'm, kind of, counseling or talking to people, I still have that grid of mystery, and again, even the fact that there's black and white and mystery is a mystery, it's like, it's just, it's all over. So,
yeah. Well, that's good. So at some point, you and Lainie began shifting towards spiritual direction. I know you were a spiritual director. I went to you for direction even before I started my spiritual direction training.
Right, part of the wellness initiative.
Yeah, and so that's how we kind of knew each other before that, but that's where we connected more and appreciate the time that you spend investing in other pastors. Yeah. And so how did that happen? How did you and Lainie kind of get into spiritual direction? If you could maybe talk a little bit what spiritual direction is for those who don't know, and then how did you get into that?
Well, let me talk about how we got into it, and then I'll talk about what it is. For some reason, that seems like a better order, but maybe not. So Lainie has always been more of a contemplative person.
Okay.
I have always been, I'm really severely ADD. And it's always been
musician, rock, drums.
Well, I mean, all through school. I mean, I never was a good student. I wasn't stupid, but I didn't do well academically because I couldn't study. I didn't know how to study. Nobody taught me how to study. I wasn't diagnosed as ADD because my mother didn't want anything to be bad, so I became a Christian. I gave my life. I surrendered my life to Jesus, and I was 100% in with him. I loved him. I followed him. I served him. I loved singing worship. But you know what? I never wanted to just be quiet and spend time with him. And I don't say that in a way that's in any way good. Yeah. It's just the way that it was. So probably the first 30 years of my pastoring, I've pastored for almost 50 years at this point. And my first 30 years, I just my spiritual life, my personal devotional life was pretty shallow. I knew it at the time, and it frustrated me, but I really didn't know what to do about it. So we got to a point in our church planting and our ministry in 2010 where we were pretty burned out. I had been sick for a year in 2007. That's a whole nother story. That's another podcast right there. And we were, it just was hard on both of us. And I was physically tired, spiritually worn out, emotionally worn out. It was just, I was, I just wanted, it would have been a mercy killing if somebody had come and said, get out of here. You shouldn't be a pastor. You should be, somewhere else. And so that's when we found out about the Pastor Sabbath retreat in 2010. And we both went to it. We both felt like we needed it. And they had, one of the offerings they had there was spiritual direction. And both of us took it, in fact, both of us did it twice, and because it was, it was offered, a couple times, and we both, it just was so helpful to us. It was so helpful in just, it was a whole new way of engaging with someone about our relationship with God, and I'll talk about that in a second. And after the retreat, the next year, we were just processing what that meant. And I got some coaching through the retreat, and Lainie was, Lainie always was more on that quiet side, so she was digging into that. And then I really felt the next year, 2011, that God wanted me to take a sabbatical. So I had, pastored that church for like 25 years, and I'd never taken any kind of a break like that. So I did. And one of the things I did is I hooked up with a spiritual director, and Lainie hooked up with a spiritual director, both of us different people. And for those 3 months that both of us took the sabbatical, we received spiritual direction. For me, the whole point of it was I needed to learn, this was my stated purpose statement for this sabbatical. I need to learn how to have a relationship with Jesus. It doesn't have anything to do with ministry, nothing to do with ministry. And I want to relate to Jesus just because I love him. And I didn't know how to do that. So I took 3 months, and I gave myself no other agenda. In fact, I didn't let myself do anything else, but just press into that. And at the end of 3 months, I did. I learned some things about spending time and desire and building. One of the main things I did is I just asked God to increase my desire for him. And he started to do that. So we came out of that retreat, we came out of that sabbatical in a really good place and a positive place. And that's when I started to work with pastors. I mean, I felt like, boy, this was a horrible place to be as a pastor. And most of my friends were kind of in the same place, my pastor friends. So I just made myself available to the Vineyard region, and I started to meet with pastors because they didn't know, the area guy, John Elmer, he didn't really know any more than anybody else. So he was really gracious and said, well, if you want to, whatever you want to do, do it. And it's got to be better than what we're doing now, which was really not much. I mean, none of us really knew what to do. So, and God spoke to me and said, I want you to care for pastor souls. And that was my second call. My first call was go back to Connecticut and plant a church with your friends. The second call, just as maybe a little less dramatic, was I want you to care for pastor souls. And so I started to do that without even being a director or anything. Okay. And both Lainie and I felt individually, separately, and together that we wanted to do this. We didn't want to just receive spiritual direction, but we wanted to be trained on how to be a spiritual director. And through some circumstances, we were able to do that. Sustainable Faith, the organization, came and did a training at our house. I mean, it was like amazing. We didn't have to go anywhere to do that. And both of us were trained, and both of us really felt like this is something that God has given us. And we were still pastoring at that time. I mean, full-time pastoring. But I knew that we weren't going to pastor forever. And I figured that at some point, maybe spiritual direction could be something that we could continue on with. The church closed faster than we thought it would. So, we were working full time. We were working part time with the church at the end, and then part time doing spiritual direction. And then we closed the church down and ended up going full time with spiritual direction. God kind of made that transition for us. He the timing of it was, we never had to say, oh, what should we do now? It just was very, very real. And then we spent 5 years in Connecticut after we closed the church down. Like I said, I was with Elm City as a spiritual formation pastor. Lainie ended up teaching spiritual direction for Sustainable Faith, and now she's leading a special training cohort for people who are interested in becoming spiritual directors. It's kind of an introduction for people who want to become spiritual directors.
So for those who aren't familiar, what would you say is spiritual direction? Why is it important?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one which I have to answer, not have to, but I answer every time I meet with a new directee. There's lots of ways we can engage people to help us in our life. There's counseling, therapy, where we talk about the past. There's coaching. As a pastor or leaders, we can get coaching to figure out our goals and know how to get there and give us aid in that. There's mentoring and discipleship and emotional healing, all things that are really helpful. Spiritual direction is one of those things, but it's not any of those things. Spiritual direction is a ministry that really focuses on our relationship with God right now, not what it was a week ago or a year ago, and not where it's going. But when I meet with someone, we talk about what God is doing in the moment. And Lainie likes to talk about spiritual direction focuses on the place where the branch connects into the vine. Jesus in John 15 says, I am the vine, you are the branches. And everything we do is fruit bearing. And the more we connect our branch into the vine, the more our soul will be full, the more that the fruit will flow out. And spiritual direction is really a time when we meet with people once a month, and we talk about how their branch is connected into the vine of Jesus. And it's just kind of, helping them to see. We ask a lot of questions. How have you seen God? Questions like you asked me, where did you see God in this? And how did, those are the kind of things that it's different every time. It's not accountability. We just deal with right in the moment. And it can also apply to discernment, because people are discerning. Part of spiritual direction is helping people to understand, what God wants them to do. Again, it's like, what is God saying to you? What is God doing in you that's going to help you to kind of know the answer to this discernment question? And we also do a lot of teaching about or helping people to find new spiritual practices or spiritual disciplines, or setting up what we call a rule of life, which is just a system, just like a kind of an informal, very flexible structure to which to kind of hang the different things that you want to do, that you feel God's calling you to do in order to help you get closer to God. It's really that soul. It's understanding that our soul is the source of everything. And the more our soul is being filled by the living water, the life of Jesus, then the rest of everything else we do is going to start to come out.
Yeah. Well, no, that's great. I encourage people to provide this type of space, or you look for this type of space, because it really is space, right?
Yeah.
Space to
It is space, yeah.
To be silent, space to reflect, space to be heard from someone, and then just have it reflected in a way that's helpful.
Yeah. Well, and the reality is, and this is something that we all have to kind of face and address, is that if we don't make space, we're not going to have space, and we're not going to do, even if we want to grow in our relationship with God, if we're not if we're not, intentional about providing space for those things to happen, it's probably not.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier, you and Lainie, as you felt release from your first call, you shifted now to the West Coast, want to be close to family, and but you're still you're still busy with this other call that the Lord's given to you.
Yeah.
But you also transitioned to a whole new place of living and a new church community here at the Valley Vineyard. And so, my question would be, how has that transition been for you?
Yeah.
It's 2.5 years, that you've been here now. How has that transition been? And what has been life-giving in this season through this church community or beyond?
Yeah. Well, the most life-giving thing as far as the change goes is being with our kids. We have 2 wonderful kids, Sarah and John. They're just unbelievably fantastic adults. We just love them. We love being with them. We respect them. They are awesome doing what they're doing. And it's just to be able to spend more time with them. That's the main reason. We could have done what we're doing right now. We could have done it anywhere.
Could be in Hawaii.
Because we could have done it in Hawaii, because it's all on Zoom.
Yeah.
I don't meet with a single person in person. I don't meet with anybody face to face. It's all Zoom. So literally I could do what I'm doing anywhere. But we're here because this is where our kids are. And we knew we couldn't be there in West LA. We couldn't, or the West Side. I don't know if there's a difference, but we couldn't be right there. I don't know if that would have been the best thing for us to be like living right, next door to them. But we're close enough, and we see them a lot. So that's been really good. And when we came out here, one of the things that, besides our kids, we knew we were going to be living not in LA proper, and we really wanted to be somewhere where we could go to the Valley Vineyard. And that was mostly because we knew you, and we really loved you. You were part of Sarah's church. When you both were at the West Side Vineyard, and we did direction together, and we've had, every time I come out here, we'd hang out and have coffee and talk, and I just loved your heart, and I knew that you would be a great pastor, a great leader of a community, and excuse me, that really has worked. Our only kind of negative is that we live a little bit far away, and because of I can't drive at night, and because of my eyesight, and it's just hard for us to be as involved in person, apart from Sunday, than we are. But in coming to the church here, the church has welcomed us. It was like we walked in, and it's like everybody goes, "Oh, we've been waiting for you. This is so great that you're here." And I'm thinking, really? It's like they just welcomed us with open arms, and there's a large community of older people, sages is what I like to call them, and they were, just unbelievably welcoming, and it's been really good. But we've also got to meet. One of the things I love about both Lainie and I love about Valley Vineyard is it's a very diverse community. It's a diverse age-wise. It's diverse racially and ethnically. We spent 5 years at Elm City Vineyard, which was a wonderful experience with just so many different races and ethnicities and people. It was just like heaven, and we really, our church, as much as we tried to do that, we had some of that, but never had as much. And Valley is much the same. We love being amongst a lot of different cultures. We had that one Sunday where that woman was doing, I don't remember her name, she had her whole family come up, and they did some kind of
Nigerian. It was her 50th birthday.
Yes. Yeah. It's like we were sitting there, and it was all these people sitting around us, and all of a sudden they all got up and started like dancing, and we're going, this is not a normal Sunday, and it was great. We love that stuff.
Yeah.
And to just have that diversity.
Yeah. Especially in these times where there's so much
so much,
Difficulty
yeah,
and lack of unity
and you know, the teaching's great. You know, we've been able to be in a connect group. First, we did a Zoom connect group, which we're just pretty burned out on Zoom. We love the people in that group, but the Zoom was a little hard. And then we went to another one in Chatsworth, and now we're actually hosting a little tiny group of 4 of us on Tuesdays, going through some stuff for Lent.
Oh, okay.
And that's fun.
Yeah.
But we love the relationships. I mean, I look around after 2.5 years, and you know, I just go to church and there's so many people. Hey, how you doing? They come up and give me a hug. And these are all people that, even though I don't spend hundreds of hours with them, there's just a real feeling of acceptance and fellowship. And
it's great. We're excited to have both you and Lainie here. I know when you guys were thinking about moving, I was secretly praying that you guys would land somewhere close to the Valley Vineyard, but understand that real estate in LA is so hard. But it was like winning the lottery when you said like you're gonna be a part of this church, and you both have brought so much you know, like you said, like that's the sage aspect of thing, the wisdom and the discernment, and then the encouragement to have. You know, for the size church we have a lot of people who used to pastor churches.
That's a fact.
And it's hard to keep pastors who used to pastor in a church, because, you know, as pastors, we would all say, I would do that differently, or I would do that differently. But it's really cool to see that people feeling welcomed and a part of our church community in that season as well.
Well, I know both Lainie and I, when we came to Valley, we made a real commitment not to criticize. I mean, not even amongst ourselves, not even to say, oh, I would have done it that way, or I would have done it that way. It's just, it's not good for our souls to do that. It's not good for anything, for anyone. So just, you know, so my goal is just to be here. And it's not like there's things I would, you know, a lot of things I would criticize, but of course I would do things a little bit differently. And so would you. And, you know, we all have our ways, and we spent 32 years pastoring and doing it our way. Honestly, you know, we don't need to do that anymore. So we're just enjoying how Valley works, and really enjoying, you know, the fellowship and the teaching. And I can't tell you how many times during sermons, God just speaks to me. And I mean, deeply, and to where for the next week I'm processing what he spoke. So there's like deep spiritual connection going on, and not just with me, but I think it's there for anybody who wants to connect with it.
It's amazing. I have one last question for you.
Okay.
And so just finally, for those who are trying to faithfully follow Jesus over the long haul, what are some things that you hope people understand about the spiritual journey? You're a man that's been following Jesus for many years. You've pastored for many years. You've been been reflective over the years as well of your life. And what are some things that you would tell somebody, okay, you want to be faithful for the long haul? What are some things that they should think about or incorporate or be open to?
There's so 2 things I think I would say. One is to, if I was to sit down with someone who just asked that question, what can I do what is the understanding, what do I need to know? Just the whole reality that every part of our spiritual life comes out of our branch and vine connection with Jesus. That we can live a Christian life without connecting our branch into the vine, but it's really hard. You know, I mean, it's not fun. It's heavy. It's, you know, Jesus says, come to me, you are laden and heavy burden. That's what happens when we try to be a Christian without the life of Jesus flowing into us. So one of the number one thing I would want to encourage people, whatever that looks like for you, you know, everybody has a different way that they connect. You know, it's not a cookie cutter. Well, if you're going to really connect your branch to the vine, then you have to do these 4 practices or these 4 things. It doesn't matter. I mean, I've done spiritual direction for over 10 years now, and I know that everybody does it a little bit differently. But I would say however it works for you, to really be intentional about connecting and feeding your soul and letting your well get filled up and then live it out. And then but be sure that if you're gonna be trying to live it out, you want to live it out with that flow of fruitfulness coming out of you. So that is, I see too many people who come into spiritual direction with me, pastors who have been doing it and doing it and doing it, and they're just worn out, and they don't have a connection. They don't really know. They don't have a vision for really being quiet and filling their souls. So that's one. The other thing is I guess it's kind of embodied with the just slow down. Is that the Christian life is meant to be lived slowly. That doesn't mean that you can't, you don't do things or whatever, but Eugene Peterson had a phrase called Godspeed. I don't know that he invented it, but he used it all the time, that you want to be going at God's speed. And you could go at your speed, but that's probably, if you're not at God's speed, then you're either going faster than God is or slower than God is, but you want to go God's speed, and God's speed is usually a lot slower than what we would be comfortable with. And slowing down to be able to see what God's doing. Again, it kind of ties in with the whole thing of spiritual direction, that in spiritual direction, we take an hour where we very intentionally help people to see what God's doing. But we should be aware of that. We can be aware of that every day of the month. You don't have to wait till your spiritual direction appointment. In fact, most people don't even do spiritual direction. And I'm not saying that every Christian needs to have a spiritual director, but every Christian needs to have that understanding that they need to slow down enough that they can see what God's doing, that they can see God's work, that they can see God's love, they can see the divine appointments, the different ways that God is active and moving in their lives. And whether that, and part of that is maybe taking Sabbath time, which is just taking time to, the way I look at Sabbath is pause, pray, and play. Are you taking a chunk of time every week where you're stopping, resting, where you're spending a little more time praying, and when you get to play, you get to have fun. A lot of times in spiritual direction, I get to the play part and they go, really? This is part of spiritual direction that you're telling me to play? And I've gotten in pastors' faces and said, you need to learn how to play. And they go, I don't know how to play. Really? It's like, all I do is work. And I go, that's not good. Not that you should play all the time, but you need to have times when you enjoy God's beauty, when you enjoy the creative things that God has done and God has given you. So slow down, move at God's speed, and yeah.
Thank you. So what I hear you say is connect, abide, be rooted in Him, and linger there, right? Like don't speed up.
Right.
Make that your priority in life, and just walk with God, right? In Him we move and have our being, right? And so, Bill, thank you so much for being here with me today, and for being vulnerable. You're just somebody who always speaks from who you are, and just appreciate having you and Lainie here at the church. So thank you for this podcast and being here with me, and for you at home, thanks as well for being here with us, and may you have a blessed day. May you linger and connect with God this week.